Well, the Biden team has made a huge effort to try to separate their technology denial measures from the overall tenor of the relationship. And they were successful to some extent in doing that, in having a somewhat functional relationship between the U.S. and China at the same time as imposing one after another of technology restrictions. This is the latest in that, and clearly the Biden team wants to go out on a high note of imposing yet more strict restrictions focused on artificial intelligence. What happens next is, of course, of the most interest, and it could play out in several ways. Clearly, Donald Trump wants to have a relationship with Xi Jinping, wants to personalize that and make it into some form of negotiation. Whether he leads with high tariffs, whether he leads with perhaps a concession on this, the semiconductor restrictions, is entirely unclear. There's a lot of turmoil right now amongst the Trump team in terms of how they should, what their first steps should be and what the initial action should be towards China.
As I was just discussing earlier about expected Chinese envoy to be in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration, but we've also heard Trump talking about tariffs on day one. So what do you think that dynamic is going to look like?
So it's not clear. You know, I think that Donald Trump wants to show some strength towards China. He also wants to show a willingness to communicate. I think he wants to do high tariffs on China, but is undecided whether to have that be linked to a negotiation or just something that he does from day one in order to provide cover for other tax cuts. So there's a lot of cross currents here. I think on the technology piece, then the chip restrictions you mentioned, the announcement was made this week, or last Friday, but there's going to be a comment period. And U.S. industry is pushing back quite hard against these restrictions, which will essentially force many countries, if they're going to buy advanced AI-oriented chips for data centers, to go through an entire process of proving that no Chinese companies will be able to access those data centers. That's a very cumbersome set of rules, and so there's quite a bit of pushback. We'll see how it plays out.
Hong Kong, in the first Trump administration, its special trading status with the United States was revoked. Now there's potential for the trade missions to be also closed in the United States. Where does Hong Kong stand in terms of the relationship with the United States?
To be honest, it's an afterthought at the current stage. Most Americans thinking about Hong Kong are thinking about what happened in 2019 and 2020, not thinking about the future. Now, the U.S. bark was stronger than its bite in terms of the punitive measures that it executed towards Hong Kong. But what happens going forward will be, unclear, and Hong Kong has agency in this conversation. So as you said, I'm a bit disappointed in how much U.S. business community is paying attention to Hong Kong as a bridge to China, an enormous economy that the U.S. must have an economic relationship with going forward. Our own company is expanding its office here in Hong Kong to help companies with that business. But I think that people are so reflective on the political changes in Hong Kong that they haven't really given much attention to whether or not, and it's an open question, whether or not Hong Kong still has a competitive advantage on the business side.